Mnangagwa regime is seemingly advancing and entrenching its dictatorship. Zimbabwe is now a fully fledged country led by a fully fledged demagogue-led country, and we know at the helm of that is none other than Emerson Mnangagwa. It is very, very important to note that the only people who can get themselves out of this dynasty of Emerson Mnangagwa is none other than the people of Zimbabwe. But also on this live broadcast, I'll be demonstrating how this will also be consequential to the region, specifically SADC region. We've seen the impact of economic decay in Zimbabwe that definitely affect neighboring countries like Botswana and South Africa and many other countries because Zimbabweans end up migrating in numbers in search for jobs, and you get to find Zimbabwe fighting against the locals in their respective countries. And on this live broadcast, I'll be taking you through to the impact of the entrenched dictatorship of Emerson Mnangagwa, particularly to the SADC region. Greetings and welcome to your lovely channel, the Hlonipani Global News. If you're watching us for the very first time, please do remember to press the red or black subscribe button so that next time when we beam live, you become the very first one to watch us. So there is actually a story from Daily Maverick. It's called Maverick News, which was actually done by Monli Makanya. It captures this topic very, very well, and I would love to share that with you. Monli Makanya, he says in his story that he says Mnangagwa at U.S. Africa Business Summit. Okay, that was something else. It says prominent actually Zimbabwean businessman and newspaper publisher Trevor Ngube penned a spine-chilling piece on Substack this week about how in 2024 and 2025 newspapers in his staple were intimidated into apologizing for and withdrawing stories that revealed President Emerson Mnangagwa's intention to extend his term beyond the constitutionally stipulated end in 2028. Now, it says, let me just get it. Okay. So the intimidation came in a writ from Mnangagwa's lawyers demanding that the respective stories be taken down within 48 hours or pay damages up to 22 million, which could accrue daily if not paid. On both occasions, the newspapers, faced with the might of one of the country's most formidable legal firms and representing the most powerful and one with deep pockets, buckled. They knew their reporting was 100% on point, but the idea of facing obvious malicious litigation that could bring them to their knees convinced them to leave to fight another day. Anyway, about 2 weeks ago, Mnangagwa signed constitutional amendments that will see him extend his term until 2030, what Ngube described as the very outcome of our newspapers warned about. This is despite consistently denying for years that he had any such intentions and taking that drastic step of threatening Newsday and the Standard. Now, the amendments will see the scheduled 2028 elections cast aside The presidential and parliamentary terms increased from 5 years to 7 years, and a shift from the system of the president being directly elected by voters to one where the head of state will be chosen by parliament. This may not sound controversial to South Africans, where the president is elected by the National Assembly. There are many other jurisdictions around the world that operate this way. ZANU-PF and its apologists have argued. So it is not intrinsically undemocratic. They are not wrong. Don't want to see this. Mnangagwa's legacy would be that of sending Zimbabwe's democracy to the cemetery and systematically replacing it with a constitutionally entrenched dictatorship. However, this is not happening in a vacuum. Since the 2000 parliamentary election, in which the Movement for Democratic Change's victory was snatched in broad daylight, the political system has been engineered to always deliver a ZANU-PF win. The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission is basically a ZANU-PF organ and has been indicted by the Southern African Development Community Observer Mission as being an enabler of flawed elections. The tightly controlled state media that dominates airwaves and those whose print products are heavily supported by government advertising is essentially the ruling party's propaganda arm. The security forces swear loyalty to the party hierarchy rather than the republic. The judiciary is pegged with loyalists or mediocre beneficiaries of ZANU-PF favors. So what do you have? A system designed to ensure permanent ZANU-PF parliamentary dominance and the presence of the party leader at the very helm. That 83-year-old Mnangagwa is that leader right now. He and his ZANU-PF successors are guaranteed the presidency through this crooked system. Where Robert Mugabe's legacy is that of choking Zimbabwe's democracy, Mnangagwa will be that of sending it to the cemetery and systematically replacing it with a constitutionally entrenched dictatorship. By the time his extended term ends in 2030, only a fool will believe that his appetite for another term will have been satisfied. Let's embrace ourselves for a repeat of Cameroon's Paul Biya, who contested an election at the age of 93. Ncube today deeply regrets the decision to bow to the threats, calling it a failure of courage. He believes they should have stood their ground and damn the consequences. We were afraid, that's the quote, afraid of a powerful president, afraid of the enormous cost of defending ourselves in a judiciary system over which the executive has accumulated disturbing influence, afraid that even if our journalism was defensible, the process itself could cripple the business. That is what intimidation looks like when it arrives on a lawyer's letterhead. Ncube wrote. He added, that experience taught me something important. Authoritarian systems do not depend only on violent men and repressive laws. They depend on the fear of ordinary institutions. The people who should be hanging their heads for failure of courage, failure of conscience, and failure of conviction are the leaders of our continent, and in particular the SADC region. Truer words could not be said. Another iteration of this statement is that evil thrives when good men are silent. This lowly newspaperman has long been very critical, sometimes unfairly, of Zimbabwe's aversion to risk when confronting the ZANU-PF regime. While it is true there have been protests that have been violently crushed, that the brutal state has spared nothing in crushing political opposition and civil society activism. The fact is that in the 26 years since the meltdown began, most Zimbabweans' form of resistance has been to skip the border and make a new life elsewhere. But failure of courage or not, Ncube is being hard on himself and his colleagues in believing that defying the threat could have staved off the certain march to full authoritarianism. In a situation where much of the judiciary unashamedly conducts itself like an extension of the ZANU-PF Politburo, a prolonged debate might have marked the demise of one of the country's most courageous media houses and actually allowed the bad guys freer reign. As painful as that decision might be, when you apply 20/20 vision in hindsight, the bottom line is that Newsday and the Standard did get to live another day and continue to shine a light on the dramatic slide to full authoritarianism. The people who should be hanging their heads for failure of courage, failure of conscience, and failure of conviction are the leaders of our continent, and in particular the SADC region. Zimbabwe has faced many perilous moments over the past 26 years, each darker than the previous. Each one of these moments has seen the country take leap after leap in greater authoritarianism. The constitutional amendments are yet another huge leap in this direction, but this time a fundamental legitimizing of autocracy. The legacy of Mugabe was the use of brute force to enforce ZANU-PF legitimacy. Mnangagwa will make the crime of oppression constitutional. The African Union and the SADC are watching this strangulation of democracy play out without lifting a finger or even raising a voice. This is not a movie, this is real life, a culmination of 2.5 decades of killing the dreams of a liberated people. Steve Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt, the Harvard academics who authored the 2018 book, How Democracies Die, contend that this need no longer happen in spectacular fashion, with coups, martial law, and the takeover of broadcast services. Instead, it happens in plain sight as elected officials kill democracy through gradual erosion of political norms and institutions. South Africa's leaders need not be reminded of the consequences of our acquiescing to ZANU-PF's savage suffocation of Zimbabwean democracy. Democracies may die at the hands of not of generals, but of elected leaders, presidents or prime ministers who subvert the very process that brought them to power. Some of these leaders dismantle democracy quickly, as Hitler did in the wake of the 1933 Reichstag fire in Germany. More often, though democracies erode slowly in barely visible steps, they argue how democracies die was apt as it came out in the second year of Donald Trump's first presidential term. when it was becoming clear that the wannabe autocrat was following the script of other democratically elected leaders who did not like the model that got them elected. When democracies die, there are consequences, mostly in the form of economic decline and political instability. Official kleptocracy thrives. The autocrats becomes voracious and vicious. The SADC governments, with South Africa being the most powerful of them, have been watching this happen in plain sight. This silence comes with consequences, not just for the country whose democracy is being killed, but for its neighbors as well. South Africa's leaders need not be reminded of the consequences of our acquiescing to ZANU-PF's savage suffocating of the Zimbabwe's democracy. If they do need a reminder, then they need to look up the name Jacinda on their phones. There are consequences for regional stability, for the SADC economy, and balanced socio-economic development in our neighborhood. Mnangagwa is popularly known as the crocodile, a nickname derived from his ruthlessness as he rose through the ranks of ZANU-PF. This carnivore is about to devour more than his own nation. The silence and inaction of our leaders serves nobody. Even if they do not care about the citizens of Zimbabwe, they should see the bigger picture. So that is the story that was done by Daily Maverick. And I couldn't agree it more than anything. It is on point. What is happening in Zimbabwe? It has been to some extent nurtured by SADC leaders. How did they do so? They have come to observe numerous times the elections in Zimbabwe, noticed how the people of Zimbabwe were taken advantage of. But in most of the cases, they will write the reports endorsing the system. And in 2023, it became clear we had a brave SADC observer mission which condemned the elections of Zimbabwe and rendered them illegal. But what did SADC do? It took the report, they put it aside, and the SADC moved on as if nothing has happened. And you see the consequences of two stolen elections, critical stolen elections in 2018 as well as in 2023. Mnangagwa saw that he could get away with anything. Having realized that, what did Emmerson Mnangagwa do? He was afraid taking the initiative of changing the Zimbabwean constitution. But he derived the courage from the fact that the region had done nothing when he rigged elections in front of the cameras, in front of international observers. It was just only reports. And a criminal like Emmerson Mnangagwa does not fear reports. This is the president who has sent his people to kill people for not supporting the bill that he currently signed as an act. And this is the president who has lied with his straight face to international media that he would just serve 2 terms, underscoring that the constitution only allowed him to serve 2 terms. He conducted numerous press briefings promising the people of Zimbabwe that he was going to stick with 2 terms. Has he done that? He has failed to do that. Do you think even when 2030 arrives, he would love to leave power? Never. He's preparing himself to continue leading Zimbabwe. There will be many camps until the people of Zimbabwe rise up, especially the people of Zimbabwe. And I pray everyone is ready for the 31st of July 2026. That is why you see all frogs, chickens, snacks in ZANU-PF, everybody is up in arms because they know this is the big deal that can actually take Zimbabwe into the proper political direction. Thank you very much for watching us. If you're watching us for the very first time, please do remember to press the red or black subscribe button so that next time when we beam live, you become the very first one to watch us. You can financially support this channel by pressing the join button and be part of our members who are the heartbeat of this channel. You can equally do so by pressing the thanks button and send us stars. Ogan is signing off. Let me love and leave you. Let's meet you on the other side of the